Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our attendees from around the world. I'm Naomi Moyer, Head of Professional Development here at Oxford. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to ELTOC. We are thrilled to have you with us here today. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. Whether you're a private tutor or a school teacher, or you're looking for resources and ideas for your team of educators, we have an exciting and informative programme in store for you. Over the next few hours, we will hear from leading experts in English language teaching. They will share insights on trends and best practices. And in our panel discussions, we will discuss leading pressing issues that affect teachers today. And of course, there'll be plenty of opportunities to ask questions and share your experiences. So get ready to be inspired, to connect, learn, and grow. Thank you once again for joining us.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. It's very great that so many of you have made the time to take part in today's session, in today's live stream. Thank you and welcome. Please type in the chat box, let us know where did you come from and what is the weather right now. I'm Jen. I'm the moderator moderating today's ELTOC on behalf of OEP. This broadcast is just one of the services Oxford University Press offers to teachers. I saw you might already like to know a bit little about us. Oxford University Press is the world's authority on the English language. As part of the University of Oxford, we are committed to following English learning worldwide. We continuously bring together our experience, expertise, and research to create resources helping millions of learners of English to achieve their potential. Here is some reminder of your certificates. Certificates of attendance are available for the whole ELTOC Chapter 6 event. They must be claimed within 48 hours. To claim your certificates, please click the link in the comments. You will be able to see the link. Yes. Oh, you can scan the QR code on the top corner of the screen. Tap or click the Claim Your Certificate link and submit your details. This is block 2. In this block, we have the Guthrie section. Now you will be able to see our schedule shortly. And here is what we got coming up. We got a 3 section for our today block 2. The first section will start shortly at 2 UTC time. The second section will start at 2:45 UTC time. And afterwards, we will take around 10 minutes break and then come into the last talk of this block. Let me bring out the calendar again, the schedule again. So as you can see here, we will have our section 1 start from the 2 o'clock UTC time. So now let us know about where are you joining us from in the chat box. And tell us how is the weather like right now. I'm based in Taiwan and it's currently sunny outside. So how about your side? Share us with us and tell us about what is the weather look like now. Oh, we can see someone from the Vietnam. And then anything else? Hello from the Mexico. What time is it in the Mexico right now? And good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning, Mohammed. Good morning. Hello, good morning, Stephen from the Philippines. Very welcome you to all of you to join us today. Whether you are joining us on Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn, let our way that you can get involved in today's live stream. You can interact with us like what you just did for the typing in the chat box. And our moderator and speaker will simply by posting the comments like our moderator just did. If you like what's happening now, please do hit those love buttons on your social media channel. If you want to focus on particular comments or question, we can bring it up on the screen. So hit the button to tell us, do you like it or do you love it? And during ELTOC, we often share the unique offers or link to the section-related resources. When we are posting a link, we will put a banner on screen and post a link in the comments where all ELTOC promotion or resource will be available for you to access. Click the link in the description now. You might be able to see it. Oh, like I just mentioned, you might also notice above my head, there's a QR code. So before we start, it's a good timing. Scan the QR code now by your mobile device, and you will be able to get the whole resource and including the certificate link, all of the information you might need. So tell us more about where do you come from, and let's warm up with your keyboard. Okay, and we can see, hello, it's sunny in Australia. It's good, always very great to have the sunny day. And then we can also see someone from the from Thailand, from the Vietnam, and then all across the different social channel. Hello. And tell about, do you got any drink yet? And if not, grab one and then join our session. Hello, we see someone from the Pakistan as well. Hello from Japan. Hello. Oh, it's raining from the Guatemala. Hello from Thailand, from Peru. In the Colombia, it's 9 p.m. So good evening now. And there's also one from the Turkey. And like I just mentioned about during the time, grab the chance to scan the QR code there. So you will be able to access all resources you need and all of the tips you might benefit to your teaching. Hello, we see so many teachers joining us from. Hello. Hello, Shinta. Good morning. Wow. Sylvia now just saying about it's 11 p.m. Argentina right now. In Brazil, also 11 p.m. It's very cold. Now in Taiwan, it's coming to the summer season, so it's quite hot right now. But today it's sunny, but it's okay. The temperature right now is 29 degrees, still comfortable. Hello, everyone. And then as our moderator also posts in the chat box about some link. So if you do have time, you can scan the QR code or click the link. Winter here. Annie, where do you come from? It's a winter, so should be the south part. The weather in Egypt is very hot, I can imagine. Hello, Anil from Brazil. Hello. We have so many audience from Brazil today as well, from the South America. Like we also have the one from Argentina. Very nice to meet you. No matter it's during the night time or during the early daytime. So we also see there's one from Czech Republic. Yeah, it's early morning. It's 3:52 right now. Yeah, so get a strong coffee if you're in the early morning, and then please stay with us. We got plenty of the topic want to share with you today. Like we just shared today, we have the 3 sections, and then from the 2 o'clock UTC time, we'll start from our first section, and then our Professor Colton will share us some tool, some AI, some mechanism or some skill to help you to improve your reading and speaking skill. And at 2:45, we have our second session, and then we have Fiona and June to join us to talk about working with the Generation Alpha and how do we help them to really learn. And after that, we have the 10-minute break. So after that, we have our last session, and then we will introduce our the final speakers, Robin and Gemma. Okay, without further ado, so I think it's time for us to start with our first session. I have a very great pleasure to introduce our first speaker for ELTOC Chapter 6, Block 2. And who is excited, please hit those like and love button now. Let us see. And then we have the wonderful Professor Corton today and Josh Yarden joining us to tell us how to empower your students through innovative AI tool for mastering reading and speaking skills. Professor Colton is an American academic with a passion for history, language, and education. He studied history at Oxford and Cambridge universities before embarking on a career as a university professor, where he currently teaches, among other things, AI and research methods. His passion for the English language and the teaching has resulted in almost 850,000 followers on Instagram. Later, you might be able to learn more about him. So, and also he is also joined by Josh. Josh Yarden is work at Oxford University Press as a marketing manager based in Japan now, and has more than 15 years of experience in language teaching industry. Firstly, as a teacher, and then with Oxford University, creating content and organizing events to support teachers inside and outside Japan. I believe if you are not the first time to join ELTOC, you might already know Josh. So I'm going to bring Professor Colton and Josh onto the screen now. Please bear with me for a second. Hello, Professor Corton.
Hello, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Hello, Josh. How are you today?
I'm doing fine.
How are you, Professor Corton? I know it's a super early time for you joining us from Poland, right? Yes, I hope you too have a great day. So now, yeah, it's a super early morning. So I will bring up your slide and then over to you. Thank you very much, and I will see you later.
Thank you very much, Jen. As Jen said, my name is Josh. I'm based in Tokyo, Japan, joining you. And I'm not an expert in AI. I know a bit about it, but I do know a lot about the English language teaching. I've been in the industry for quite some time. I've taught various stages here in Japan and around other places. So I'm very happy that we do have an expert, Professor Corton. So Professor Corton, why don't you say a bit about yourself?
Well, I'm originally from the US, Nebraska, if anyone's curious. And I studied in England, so was at Oxford and Cambridge, and have been basically in Europe since then, teaching lived in Russia, Poland, mainly Poland, but a bit of Russia, Spain, Italy, quite a bit. But I've been teaching at the university here in Poland and guest lecturing in other places.
Great. Yeah. We're on opposite sides of the earth, but I'm glad we're here in this session together.
Yes.
My perspectives from both areas. Yeah, so today's topic is quite an exciting one. It's we're going to look at AI and ChatGPT a little bit. It's been taking the world by storm over the past few months. Of course, AI has been, it's been around for some time. It's not extremely new to, but I think with all the emergence of the press around ChatGPT and how it's starting to impact education, I think a lot of people are starting to pop up on their radar. So. Why don't we start there? So, what are your feelings about that sudden emergence of AI and ChatGPT, especially in education and language teaching, just in general?
Yeah, well, in general, it presents opportunities and pitfalls or problems, as I think everyone is seeing. At least they see some of the problems, especially if you're teaching writing. So if you look at all the various disciplines within English, the reading, grammar, writing, speaking, listening, it's writing. If the teachers listening today are writing teachers, you're most impacted by what's happened since November 30th, when ChatGPT went public. I'm a writing teacher, research methods and writing. And so this has directly impacted me, which was initially unsettling because you thought, what am I going to say if they only just need to press a button to get the desired results? But as I've delved deeper into this, innovation and teaching methods that go along with it, I see a lot of opportunity. Now, my task today is not to talk about writing, but I might intersperse some of my experiences related to that because I think it's very relevant. But for the teachers out there who are considering AI tools, I'll offer a bit of guidance. I think it could help you sort of think how to think about this. So one way to think about it is to break up the teaching process into segments. So we have the preparation time. We also have the in-class teaching, the actual teaching time, whether that's online or in person. And then we have the assessment or the grading, which follows. And I think each of these sets or these windows of, the teaching process is important. I want to talk today about the preparation. And I think there's some opportunities to save teachers time, genuinely save time. I'm using some of these methods and it does actually save time. Then there's another way to look at it, which is teacher, student, administration, and then tech. So we're obviously focusing on the teacher aspect, but it necessarily includes the students. So we're going to look at some ideas related as well to students in speaking. So I think these are two interesting ways to look at it from the teacher perspective and then from the more holistic education perspective.
Yeah, that's right. As you said, lots of benefits are there. A few things that can trip you up if you're new to it, I think, as you said, saving teachers time is probably a huge thing we can get out of, or we can take advantage of all these wonderful technologies that are continuing to be developed and rolled out.
That's right. We're going to talk, Josh, today about a few of these. These are examples that then you can try out, or you can try others out. I can tell you, and we'll give helpful links at the end. There are new apps coming out all the time, which is overwhelming for the busy teacher out there. Yeah. But that's why what we've decided to do is actually provide one or two concrete examples. It's sort of a workflow process that you can at least see how it works on the ground, and then make some decisions based on your own preferences, your own sort of understanding of the teaching, profile. And then it can be an individual choice from there. So we'll look at some specific examples in a moment.
Yeah. But before we get to examples, let's take a step back and just look at just how the role of generative AI and these tools like ChatGPT, how do they impact the role of the teacher specifically?
Yeah, this is great. And it's a great question, and one that is a concern for many. And I'm going to posit the following. I believe that, ironically, and despite all of the innovations in technology that would sort of enable students to produce things not on their own, I would suggest that, in fact, teachers are even more important today than ever, because it's going to require oversight. It's going to require more engagement by teachers to monitor that process of students becoming fluent in English, learning the requisite and appropriate skills required not only for the classroom but for their careers. So I would contend, and it's bearing out in my own personal experiences in the classroom, but I would contend that there's a greater need for teachers now than ever before, because if you leave the students to their own devices, then suddenly they're just going to put it on autopilot and not think. That's a natural reaction that no one needs to be offended about. We were probably very similar as students. We take the path of least resistance, and what we're trying to do is force them to think. It's the same thing we had to do before ChatGPT. We just have to do it in a sort of different situation, different circumstances. But I would contend the task remains the same, but we need even greater vigilance to make sure students improve their skills.
Well, that's good news for teachers. So we're not going to be put out of a job.
So you're not going to lose your job yet.
Yeah. So that's great. And as you said, like it just develops, or it just requires a little bit of a change in in the role and what we're doing. We can use it to take advantage and take some of the burden and focus on other things. And so it's kind of like a collaboration between teachers and AI. We're helping each other. Yeah.
That's right.
Before we go any further, if anyone in the audience does have any questions or any comments, do just make sure you post them in the comments, and we can address any as we go through the talk today. All right. Well, shall we look at some tools already, or do you have anything else?
I think we can, and I think this will probably spur some questions.
Okay.
So what I'd like to do is, because this is such a vast area, and honestly, and I'm speaking from my own experiences, many teachers probably are feeling as I did. Where do you start? I mean, you can start with ChatGPT, but I mean, things are it's proliferating at such a level and volume that I think people are just reluctant to even get started because they feel wholly insufficient in their knowledge. So I'm going to give you just some specific examples. We're going to get the conversation started. I'm going to show you what one tool is for reading, and then walk through a few of these permutations, teaching permutations on how you could develop this in the classroom. So as we open the first slide, I'm going to show you, I'm actually going to go into some detail on what you need to do. This is a Chrome extension. Now, if any of this is unfamiliar to you, you can reach out to me or to Josh or to OUP afterwards. You're going to have our contacts, and you can ask specific questions. So don't feel that if you're lost now, you're lost forever, or at least for a while. We'll help you get started. This is a Chrome extension. We can explain that later, but it's a browser Chrome, and you can add this, and it's called WizDolia. You can see it in the upper left, WizDolia. And as it says here, it's auto-generated flashcards to make studying a breeze. Now, for those students out there who might be a little bit lower level, a breeze means easy. And so what this does, let me just tell you, for teachers, once we install this, and I'm going to go through it with you, then every website you open, every news article that you read will give you an option at the bottom, and I'll show you in a minute, for you to press a button, and yes, it is that simple, and it will generate comprehensive questions. And this is great in the fall for teachers who are tired after a full day of teaching and don't feel like reading the article straight away. They'll maybe read it in the morning. Obviously, you're going to have to be familiar with it. But what WizDolia does is not only generate the questions, it gives you the answers. And so for those of you who are, some of us, we just run out of time at the end of the day. And so this is, I think this can be a lifesaver for some of you teaching reading. It shouldn't be a crutch, but it's a great start of a lesson, as we're going to find out. So how do we do this? You can see there it says add to Chrome on the bottom left. Add to Chrome. You press that button. Thank you. And then you can see the arrow, the up arrow. You want to make sure that that WizDolia logo is present in your Chrome extensions. And again, you can get help by that. And how you know it's present is that the tack button, the pin button below, you can see is filled in. That's how it looks in Chrome. Now, once it's up, then you sign up. I sign up with an email. It literally takes an email, a short password. I don't even think it takes a password, actually. I think it confirms with your email, and you're good to go. This process takes 1 minute. So once we sign up with an email, then the next slide will show us. That's right. Now, can we go back a slide? I sort of overlooked. If you can see here, I've gone to The Economist. Now, the web address is very small, but The Economist, and you can see just part of the title there. It's Lyft plans to significantly reduce, and I think it's the number of workers at the firm. But Lyft is it's a online taxi company that competes with Uber. So this is a business article for business students. So if you have students, maybe teenage and up, adults obviously, who are dealing in business, you can open the site, and then we move to the next slide. And it will, once you've registered, it automatically, once you press generate flashcards, and this is found at the bottom of the article, you can generate flashcards step 1, and step 2, it will then list the questions. You can determine how many questions are asked. You can change the questions up, but the questions are there. And so you can actually present this in class. As you can present it on the screen, and you can have students talk about it and then present the questions. You don't have to do it this way. You can actually have it just on your own laptop. But what we see then is, if we move to the next slide, the list of questions it's produced. Now, Josh, feel free to sort of insert anything you want to. So here we have the 5 questions that it's produced on this occasion. Now, where do we go from here? And if there's something that's not being taught at the moment, there's almost no discussion currently on how to integrate AI with me, the teacher, in the class. How does this work? How does this symbiotic relationship that is meant to help each other, how does this actually work? I'm going to walk through what I would do in this circumstance. So we have a few options. We have 5 questions here for our students. Now, it's a reading assignment, but obviously we want to include some speaking. So this is a great time, first of all, to see if they understood the task and to ask the questions. But from here, then we have the potential for interesting dialogue and discussion. Now, if you have older students, and if you have students from different countries or different parts of the country, of one country, then you can begin to ask some interesting questions that move beyond the article. How many have experiences with taxi apps? How many have used Uber? How many have used Lyft? Are they popular in your country? So you can have a really interesting discussion based on student experiences. And we all know that if students are speaking from their own experiences, they tend to talk more. So that's one way excuse me. So that's one way we can sort of move this this study. But there's other ways we can do this. So we can ask, let's say we want to do for younger students, obviously a taxi company probably isn't appropriate for young learners, obviously. But if we have a business class, but even if we are just focusing on language, maybe we're looking at B1, possibly A2 level, we then can maneuver or transition this in a different direction. We can ask the students to focus on the questions and how questions are composed. Obviously, we know we reverse or invert the order. And so we look at 5 examples of how we produce questions in English. And then it starts to get interesting because we can say, all right, in English, we have why, number 1, what, number 2, how, number 3, and who. But are there other W questions in English? And it gets them to sort of understand. Eventually, someone will say where. And so then we can ask them or prompt them to look at the article again and ask a where question. And we can then, with partners, go in that direction. So that's more of a grammatical sort of spin on this lesson. And then there's one for advanced students. So if you're teaching C1 or B2, or you're teaching adults, and you want to challenge them in their thinking, then you can move to different levels of questions. You can open up and say, listen, these are, factual questions in the article, but let's look at some analytical questions. And so now you're challenging students on a deeper level. And after all, it's my contention, and I think the contention of Josh and others here, that you're not only rehearsing the language, you're rehearsing or you're developing their skills, their ability to think better. Because if you have great English, but nothing interesting to say, you won't get that job. So we're developing students not only with their linguistic capabilities, but with their mind. That's the goal of all teachers, is to develop their thinking. And posing questions at different levels is a great way to do that. They will be confused perhaps at first, but we can talk about analytical questions. For example, how would you characterize the tone of the article? And students are like confused because it's not found directly in the text. We're asking questions that it forces you to sort of deduce based on certain word choices what that can be. So it's not directly in the text, it's indirectly. So you can have these interesting discussions and interesting ways of using one AI app and go in 3 or 4 directions.
Yeah, that's great. Instantly reading an article and producing questions or flashcards. Yeah, what a time saver. I can imagine.
It really is.
Yeah.
This is just one way, but yes.
Well, that's an amazing tool that I think a lot of teachers, I think we have a few people in the chat saying they're using AI for different reasons. How about, you said he has a few more tools. Should we look at one more?
Yeah. Now, Lydia has asked about preschoolers. Now, I think preschoolers, you have to be a little bit more, I think, a little bit more careful with the material you use on AI, because it is, so there's a generative AI. Lydia House has asked this question. There's a generative AI that's developing that produces from text, you can get visuals. And I think whenever you're dealing with preschoolers and young learners, they have to see it. If you put stodgy, dry as dust text onto a screen, they're going to fall asleep or start niddling, getting distracted. So but the beauty of AI, we won't talk about it today, unfortunately, but I can send some helpful links. But there are generative models now that produce visuals that can even talk. I'll just insert this now. There's a history, a talk history or hello history. We might touch on it later. You can actually talk to famous people. And I think students at a young level, if the person's famous enough, they would really enjoy these things.
Wow, that's amazing. Great.
Yeah, let's move on then.
We'll
We'll go to the next slide, perhaps. Sorry. So from here, now for those of you who, just to sort of follow this through to completion, for those of you who actually have a longer text or have more questions, then Anki is perfectly suited for your needs. It's an app that's incorporated into WizDolia, so they are integrated, and it produces, as it says here, powerful, intelligent flashcards. Now, I think most older teachers, including myself, remember the age they have flashcards. Well, they've come back, obviously, online. That's not new. But what is new is that it's sort of AI generated, and it helps you, it sort of programs the learning, what you miss, how long it takes you to answer the question. And it has this algorithm that supposedly produces better studying. So then the next time you review, it will change the order based on your previous answers. So this is, I think, very good to give as students as homework. And I think with all, just one piece of advice that I've had to learn this semester as I'm using some of these tools, one thing you have to let them know is, A, it's okay to use these. You're not cheating yet. Might talk about that later. So you give them permission to use some of these tools within the boundaries that you've set. But this is critical. You ask them for the workflow, the process. What did you do with it? How did you sort of progress with this? This often involves a screenshot or a short paragraph explaining their interaction with the app.
Yeah, that's an important point about making sure they understand the boundaries. But yeah, showing the work, how they got the work is also, I mean, essentially critical to, making sure that they're making the best use of it. Allows you to, jump in and correct them, or to, make some suggestions to, make the process smoother as well.
That's right. Exactly. And I think we have one more.
All right, shall we?
So the flashcards can be homework. Twee is an interesting app. There are many of these now, but they produce the same effect that WizDolia did, but with videos. WizDolia actually does videos as well, but Twee focuses on YouTube videos. So if you're assigning students, obviously this isn't reading and speaking, but if you're assigning students something for listening or comprehension of that sort, then this is very helpful, and again, can save you time if you're tired in the evening. If you're like me, I love to read or prepare early in the morning. So if you're tired after a day's work, this can actually generate the questions for you very quickly based on the video, and then you can submit that to your students for homework. Again, it will produce the questions as well. So in these rare cases where you actually don't have time to watch the whole video, Twee has your back.
Can do it for you. That's great. Another time saver.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've covered tools that can, look at text and produce questions, videos produce questions, flashcards. So lots of useful time-saving apps already. What else? What else can we provide the teachers with?
Yeah, this is interesting. It's just, it's nothing new. It's been on the market a while, and some of you already know about it. But it's, I think it's really interesting for students at home. If they want to practice their pronunciation, what you can do is you type in a word, and you actually get videos at the moment YouTube videos at the moment they say the word you need. So in this case, inadequate, you don't know how to say it. You can go and it will give you a number of video options, and it goes automatically through them, or you can move them forward and hear how different speakers on YouTube pronounce that word. So it's just fun to play with. And again, as teachers, you can utilize this as homework. If someone is struggling with their pronunciation in a particular way, maybe a vowel, maybe a consonant like the letter R sometimes can be tricky, then you can have them search for keywords and practice with the YouTuber.
That's great. And you can get, obviously you can hear lots of different pronunciations of the same word. you get different
That's
context.
right.
And all
That's
that.
right,
So,
Josh.
yeah.
You've got, in theory, you've got the British, the American. I think you can see at the top there, Aussie or Australian, and maybe Ireland. I think.
Great. Yeah, that's another good one. Pronunciation we've covered now. Where do we go next?
I think we're going to look at actual speaking. So, Chat DID. Excuse me for. I'll just get started into it. Chat DID has actually been changing a lot in the last month since we put this program together. And it now allows you to, the student, and this is as a teacher, all of us have students who are shy, or they don't have any friends, or they don't feel confident, or they're just not great speakers. And they just don't want to embarrass themselves in public or in the classroom. This is a great tool, but it's a tool for everyone. This Chat DID actually talks to you. You can talk, and it talks back. And what I did when I was sort of preparing for this is at the time, you could do voice to text. So you would speak, and it would write this Chat DID, and then she would speak back to you. And it's a woman here. I don't think we have options to change it at the moment, although I think that will be different later. But what's very interesting is that you can ask it to correct your English. Can you please correct my grammar mistakes? And so you actually can have a private teacher at home now. And it was pretty accurate. The mistakes I made some elementary mistakes, I made some intermediate mistakes, and then I made some advanced mistakes. And it caught most of them. And if I can say very generally, ChatGPT isn't always great with grammar, but this, I think for your students, I think can be a great value and benefit. And it can address the needs of those, I can say, most vulnerable in the class, those least likely to speak. And we all have them. So there are others that are very naturally going to talk with any stranger they find on the streets of Tokyo and all the foreigners. But many others won't. And I think this is a great tool. It's free. It allows you up to 30 sessions. These sessions are unlimited. So you have an opportunity to try it out. At least it was free. It's changing. This particular app is changing quickly. And the problem, one of the struggles you have if you've started to dip into this is you notice that they start free in the beta and they quickly move to a premium model where you have to freemium, where you get a bit of free. So this is a great opportunity. And here we have an example. On the right here, we have a voice recording. So you can type if you want to practice your writing. If you want to practice your speaking, you press the voice recording. I've indicated it there on the bottom right. And what I mentioned is, my name's Chris, nice to meet you. I would like you to correct my English. And I'd like to talk about football or design or clothing. So you can talk about any subject. Now, what you'll want to do as a teacher, and this is obviously an issue, is you want to strictly control the content that they're talking about, because AI is pretty generous with what is allowed. So one way to do that is to ask the students to provide a screenshot of the conversation. And this will sort of help you monitor the content.
Great. Yeah. Speaking practice with an AI. That's amazing. Yeah. Think of all the possibilities.
The voice is quite good, actually. And it's not completely native, but it's getting close. So got a good option now.
Nice.
Let me just say, I understand that for some teachers, there's a technical issue here with internet stability and just access to internet in some cases. But this really does bridge. I know there's a lot of talk about, the economic issues. Some students aren't actually able to afford these. In this case with Chat DID, in a lot of these models, there's a free option at the beginning. So even students who we would categorize as not well off have options to speak with someone approximating native level for free. And I think that's something to think about.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful to have, that at your fingertips, no matter economic situations and that. So that's great. Well, you shared so many different tools, so many different things that can save teachers time. You've explained, how this role is going to help educators, deliver possibly more personalized learning opportunities, that kind of thing. So before we go any further, if there is anybody in the audience with any questions or any comments, again, please do type them in the chat, and we'll see if we can get to any of them. We have Lydia House here, said it definitely helped non-native speakers with pronunciation. Yes, that's one of the, I think, the benefits that Professor Corton mentioned as well. Pronunciation, yeah.
I've just now noticed the comments on the right, so I've just opened that up. If you have questions, please feel free to ask them. Let me give a general piece of advice for teachers considering the adoption of AI, either in the class or as preparation or assessment. Now, today, we've not discussed assessment at all. We'll save that as a spoiler for a future ELTOC. But I want to make one recommendation or one form of encouragement is for teachers out there to try one thing. It's overwhelming to consider all the opportunities, opportunities out there. Pick one thing. I've given you, or we've given you today, a few options. Just try one thing. That's your goal the next week. And then give us feedback in the form of a message to me on Instagram or to Josh in an email or others. Let's hear from you, but try one thing, and then it becomes personal. Then it becomes real, and then you start to use it. I've tried to illustrate how I use these apps. I love using it in the classroom. I can tell you students are fixated on the screen because it's new. And a little bit, there's an element of surprise. Even if you prepare your lesson, ChatGPT doesn't produce the same answers every time. Yep. But for me, I love this sort of real aspect to it, the sort of that it's not completely pre-planned. And so students get a lot out of these. But we can go to some of the questions if we want. But my challenge before I forget, try one app and give us some feedback on it.
Yeah, start small. Yeah. Start small.
All right.
Take on one tip. Let's see if we have anything in the chat.
I see Mickey L has said, is DID only American English, or can they change the setting? That's good. So at the time I was using it, which was a few times, but the latest was 2 weeks ago. It had one voice, unfortunately. I'm certain, and I know that there are others that are out there that have different accents. I'm not sure I would categorize. Yeah, there are definitely options for different types of accents.
Okay. There is a question here. I don't know if we want to get into it. Maybe we could lightly about the fear that these kind of programs could substitute teachers someday.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. So if all students needed to do was to speak to someone and get automatic correction, well, I certainly think that's going to be an advantage for students everywhere. I see that as sort of positive, to be honest. In my view, I have a lot of followers on Instagram, more than 800,000. And I can tell you that I've encountered in most cases, students that don't have access to native speakers, who don't have access either online for financial resources or in person for a number of reasons. So I see this as really positive to get students access where they wouldn't actually have it before. They don't have the financial means. In terms of replacing teachers, I don't think it'll ever happen. Fortunately, and I'll tell you why, as I mentioned at the outset, teachers are needed now more than ever to guide and focus, and not only the language side of it, not only the curation of the homework, but also, as I mentioned when we were going through the practice model, of having students improve their thinking.
Right.
Now, all the AI models, they're very poor at sympathy, at sort of understanding how students react in the classroom, you know, personality, character, and helping students form their thinking. And this is something I think teachers will always be, you know, there for. They'll be needed. So I don't think we need to worry about that so much.
Yeah, Merv had a good suggestion along those same lines. It's like, I mean, it's great at giving those inputs, but the teacher, yeah, is still very crucial to the learning process, of course, yeah, and always will be, as you said.
So we have a question from Mrs. Yu asked about the famous people. It's Hello History, and it's literally one word, Hello History, and you can talk to famous people. And I think for your students, the new famous people, it's really, you know, Justin Bieber and these sorts of people. Obviously, more historical figures, Napoleon or anyone else you want to talk to. What's interesting here is that you can give, every student has their own favorite, you know, person they'd love to talk to. And this is a great conversation piece. You can start the lesson with, all right, you have 2 empty places at your dinner table this evening. I want you with a partner to agree on the 2 people you're going to invite. And then, unbeknownst to them later, you can pull out a Hello History and probably get them on the screen. And then we can talk. And of course, their eyes are going to get very big. But more importantly, they're going to talk. They're going to they're going to sort of engage. And this is what we want. And that's, I think, the benefit of these tools is we couldn't talk to Napoleon before.
No. Now we can.
Now we can.
All right, looking through the chat. Let's see. There's... Yes, teacher's always there. Do we want to talk about privacy at all? Concerns about using these apps due to privacy concerns?
Maybe I'll
save that.
I would follow up with and ask what sort of privacy issues are there. Maybe we'll ask Karina to clarify what privacy issues she's encountered. All right.
We do have a bit of time, so please do pop in the comments any questions or any...
So let me talk then just a little bit more about this to sort of refine it. I know that some of us, if you haven't used any of these, sort of applications in class, I'm using it a lot in class, not just for preparation. I haven't really got into the assessment part yet because that's not a lot of what I'm doing. I'm not assessing very often, so that's not a critical need. Although I know for high school teachers and below, it is. So this is something that you really want to consider. ChatGPT is but I'll tell you what we've done. We've done assessment in class, and if we don't have questions, I'll elaborate on it for just a minute.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so there's I'm teaching a lot of writing, which obviously is the most at risk sort of sub-subject within the English curriculum. And so I just hit it head on. I use ChatGPT in the class, but what I do now is you understand that there's a lot of questions that need to be answered by the students. So as an example, we do research essays and writing. But the principle is the same. So hear me out, even if you're not teaching at university, the principles apply to everyone. You give the student the task to do initially. You can do it in class or outside. They do the task. Then then I ask ChatGPT to assess their output. So recently we did an outline of the essay. So they did an outline and they did their best, supposedly. And then we asked ChatGPT to assess the outline, and then provide their own outline. And then then the students brought this into class and we talked about it. We had students who had their own outline, and I asked them, okay, let's talk about, and they had to write it out actually, because we don't have time to go through all students. What did you think about the feedback on their outline? What was valid, what wasn't? And so now it starts to become more real. You start to see that AI isn't infallible, that is to say, it makes mistakes, it exercises poor judgment on occasion, but as well, there's very salubrious suggestions that can be profitably incorporated. And so what we do then is we talk about these. And let me just make one very important point for teachers of sort of adult or mature students. I challenge them with their thinking. So for example, they'll say, I didn't like the ChatGPT outline. I might agree with them, but I'm interested to know why. They can get the answer right, but if they get the rationale wrong, the skill hasn't been attained. They don't really understand the skill yet, whatever that is. Yeah. So make sure and probe students below the answer and ask why. And that, I think, is the ultimate test on whether they actually understand the skill. Because again, we want to keep developing the skill alongside of the AI, because when they get into their job, they're going to be required to exercise that skill, and AI won't always come to the rescue.
Exactly. Yeah, we can't use them as a crutch. They can support and help learning, but
thank you, Ariza.
All right. Well, that is just about time for us. Do you want to walk through your contact details?
Well, that's very kind. For those of you who want to follow up, I'm active on Instagram. It's Professor Corton all the way through. LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. I've just now opened a website, but it's Professor Corton all the way through. I do answer messages, so it gets a bit full, but I do get back to you. So you have any questions? I'm even on Little Red. You can see there's, I'm not sure. Yeah, the Little Red book for those of you in Asia or China who use this, I'm also publishing there. So I think the most interesting part of this, if I can leave you with, one piece of advice, I've already mentioned it before, give it a try. Give it a try personally, and then you can determine to what degree you want to sort of foist this onto your students. But if you want, after you try it, give me some feedback. I'd love to dialogue. This is obviously a new experience for all of us. I've been using it actively in the classroom, so I feel a little bit more comfortable talking about it. But you all will too in time. But start small. Start on your own before you expose it to your students in class. And let me know how it goes.
Yeah. Great advice. Great tips. Oh, all right. Jen, nice to see you again.
Thank you so much. Yeah, nice to see you again. Thank you so much, Professor Colton and Josh, for such a wonderful session. And then, as I know, there's a lot of the comment, and thank you from our comments, and the fantastic and the great ideas as well, and about how to deal with the ChatGPT and all of those AI tools. Thank you so much. And now I will need to take you off the screen, and thank you again to see you. So, like Professor Colton already shared with all about his contact information. So. Go connect with him, and in the social media, social channels. Thank you so much, Colton, and then I hope you enjoy your weekend.
Appreciate it. Thank you,
Josh. We will see you later again.
Yes, we will.
Okay. Okay, just before we move on to our next section, I want to give you a quick reminder again about your certificate. Your certificates of attendance are available for the whole ELTOC Chapter 6 event. They must be claimed within the 40 hours to claim your certificate. Click the link in the comments. It should be appear here now. Yes, thank you. Or scan the QR code here. Tap or click the claim your certificate link and submit your detail. And now we already have our next speakers waiting for us. So let's start our second session. The second session, we have the Fiona Marchling and the June Lee join us to tell us the topic of the working with the Generation Alpha. How do we help them really learn? Fiona Marchling is a teacher, trainer, writer, and ELT consultant based in Oxford. She is currently a member of teaching staff at the Harvard College, Oxford University, but also living and taught in Spain for 28 years before her return to the UK. Her professional interests include secondary education, neuroscience, and cognitive development in age 12 to 27. Project motivation, clear, and material writing, vocabulary teaching, and creative writing. And we also have the June. June has taught a variety of the students in the EFLO and the ESL community, range from kindergarten to university student and the business professional. He has held the position as an academic director, content and curriculum developer, and academic advisor in his nearly 20 years of experience in Asia. He holds great respect for educators and administrators who show passion toward nurturing a learner's path to success. So I'm going to bring Fiona and June onto the screen now. Bear with me for a second. Hello, June. Hello, Fiona. Hello,
Jen.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Sounds great on this end.
How are you today?
I'm a little tired.
What time is it from the Fiona side from the UK?
3:45 in the morning.
I hope you got a strong coffee with you.
I actually had decaffeinated coffee.
Thank you so much. So I will leave over to you and then I will see you later.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, or good evening. I don't know.
Well, super good morning to you, I guess. I'm definitely not jealous about the position. I am sitting in my place at 11:45 a.m. It's right at the beginning of our afternoon.
And I've got the sun is about to come up, I think. Look.
Oh no! Oh, okay, not too bad. But a very good call on taking the decaf. We do appreciate you joining us at such a late hour, but it's great to see your topic being discussed today, and it's good to see all of our teachers joining us as well. Fantastic first session, and we want to make sure that everyone is warmed up. Fiona and I have discussed that our chat box participation is going to be something we're really, really counting on. We want to make sure that our discussion is a discussion, not just between two people, but with everyone joining us here today. So hopefully you're okay with that too, Fiona.
Yeah, I hope I see. I've got my glasses here hanging around my neck so that I can spot questions.
Yes. It's always good to see so many different members joining us, and I see a lot of good mornings.
A lot of good mornings. Everybody.
Yes, that's
Amal
great.
is from Saudi Arabia. I wonder where other people are.
Yes, please go ahead in the chat box, everyone. Tell us where you're coming from. I'm joining from Seoul, South Korea. Fiona mentioned you are coming from where again?
I'm in Oxford.
Oxford itself.
Oxford, yes. Cowley Road.
Our home city there. Mongolia.
Half an hour walk from the center. So, yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah, we have a member coming from Mongolia, which is amazing.
Goodness, Ukraine. Hello, Ukraine. My neighbors are from Ukraine here.
Wow. Well, we have Vancouver, Ukraine,
Germany,
Australia.
Guatemala. Oh, Germany, you're up very early as well, Mickey. Pakistan, Australia. Good morning,
Mexico.
Australia.
Wow.
Buenos dias. Just
yes.
Buenas noches in Mexico.
Well, yes, it's actually this is actually quite nice to see. It's one of it's one of my most diverse global responses. We think we have every.
Look at that: Mexico, Vietnam, Russia, Taiwan, Brazil.
It's very, very nice.
It's me, USA.
Nice.
Hello.
Well, it's good to see that all of our teachers have found the chat box and they know how to use it. So there's no excuse, everyone. Yes. So I do want to just quickly, if you can put our title slide up for us. There is I do want to read our introduction and what our title is. It says working with Generation Alpha and how do we help them really learn. So I think the word that pops up to me that really stands out is the word generation. So in our chat box, everyone, I just want to throw this question out to everyone. Everyone represents a different country, different backgrounds, different culture, and we are not asking for your age. But what I do want to ask is, think about your generation as a adolescent child, as a learner, elementary, middle school age. In a few words, how would you describe your generation? Very, very simple. Please don't tell us your age. Don't tell us your age bracket. But just by describing your generation, how would you describe and how would you kind of categorize or label your generation? So as we're getting some responses in, Fiona, I would like to share mine. Hopefully you can kind of guess.
Go on, tell me.
Okay, so I would have to describe my generation as elementary, grade school student. I think that the best description would be Saturday morning cartoons. Saturday morning cartoons. I think that really, really highlights what generation I'm from and what I enjoyed as a child.
Well, my generation, let me think, end of primary, color television Saturday morning cartoons.
Well, yes.
Yes, we went color.
Yes, my TV wasn't black and white, so hopefully that clarifies that part too.
This is it. We started black and white. People had color TV, but you had to have money in the house. So if your parents were young, basically, you didn't have a color television until your parents were a little bit older. So
yeah, that actually is that is very, very different. It definitely describes what kind of background and upbringing and the environment we're actually setting ourselves into as well. And it's great to hear your responses, everyone. If you can just tell us, how would you describe your generation as a child?
The world. Fun, cool, tech savvy. Oh, my generation, not that.
Gabriella Lovey has said VHS video player. Oh my gosh, VHS.
VHS, yeah. Gosh.
That cool little plastic thing, and you open it up or you slide it out of the box.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I've got a load of VHS videos next to me here. We're on to sandwich generation. Yeah. Okay, I can guess which that one is. I was saying to June earlier, I'm born in a kind of a grey area, just by the end of one generation and the start of the next. I like to think that I'm in the second one, which was punk music and stuff when I was a teenager. Well, young teenager, like 12 maybe.
Yes, that sandwich comment is actually very, very true for many of us. And even if it's not physically within that year zone, but it's just that transition where we were at. Even my hometown was very slow. I was born and raised in Kansas.
Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah. Super Mario and Dragon Ball Z.
Well, I watched it in Catalan. I lived in Catalonia, Barcelona at that time, so it was Bola de Drac. It was called Son Gohan and Son Goku and all these, but it was all in Catalan. So yeah, Brisbane, hello. Well, it was the Australians that invented these names, Generation Alpha and things. So if you're in Australia, you have no excuse for not knowing.
Well, that's actually
your TV was black and white. Yeah, mine was. This is it. I mean, it wasn't just age; it was economics. People spent their money on different things, didn't they? Madonna, yeah.
Excellent.
What is Generation Alpha? Yeah, exactly. That's where we're heading.
So it's actually good to know that all of us do recognize that there are differences and there are generation. Everyone brings in something else. So going into our topic, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to be focusing on Generation Alpha and how do we actually really help them to learn. So Fiona, can you just tell us a little bit of background of why this topic interests you and why this is a field that you have been researching?
Yeah. I mean, you and I were having a laugh about this about an hour ago. I got very interested in secondary education, adolescence, cognitive development, motivation, psychology, basically, of students aged from 12 to, and I'll tell you the ending age in a minute, because personally, I was a terrible teenager. I was a really, really bad student at school. I mean, really bad. You know, my father still has not forgiven me. I never did homework. I hated school. I didn't actually skip school at all. And, you know, I didn't play hooky, but I really was so disengaged. And then when I became a teacher, I was okay at teaching teenagers and I sort of managed to connect with them, but I was very young myself at that time. And then I became a head of studies, and as a head of studies in this very big school in the Canary Islands, which has got tremendous social range, there's very, very wealthy people, and there's also a high level of poverty. I decided I should really teach the difficult classes, the 4-year-olds and etc. But I also had a couple of classes of teenagers who could not pass English. And I say that very carefully because actually they could, but they believed they couldn't. And so they were failing. And if you failed English, you couldn't actually finish your school education without that certificate. It was one of the key subjects. So I sat down, you know, I thought, well, I've got to help these people and I need to work out how. So I started by thinking, what was it that my teachers did that demotivated me? And therefore, by inverting that, how would I motivate students? So having started doing that and finding that it was working and that all my students started to pass and started to believe, and I actually came to the conclusion that really it is largely about self-confidence. But I then thought, well, instead of just doing this intuitively and anecdotally, I want to start studying this. So I started studying it and I specialized in it and I researched. And I started off looking at motivation and motivation psychology in the classroom. And then sort of gradually over time, particularly now I'm in Oxford, I've moved more towards the brain and cognitive development. And an interesting thing I discovered was adolescence, neurologically speaking, starts about age 12 and doesn't finish until the ages of between 25 and 27. So even if you teach adults, a very high percentage of your students are going to be in that age group of cognitive adolescence. Female people tend to fully develop by about 25, and male people, it's about 27. It takes a little longer.
a little bit more time for
but that's just, you know, that's
actually, yes. But that
just
actually
human beings. You know?
Yes. I mean, it does make sense in that idea. You mentioned a lot of great things of going through that experience and being part of that, what could have been done better, and then turning it around, analyzing the process itself. And I think that's actually something that even right now, even as we have our discussion, we are able to share that knowledge and share that process in a little way with all of our members today too. Of course, within this time together, we're not going to be 100% at your level, but it's good to see that you're able to give us a bit of that process and share that with us today. And as we can see on the screen, it actually starts with those definitions. I think William Henderson mentioned, what is Generation Alpha?
I know. Well, that's it. Well, I also, before we get into the two labels here, Generation Alpha, Generation Z, or Zeta, or Z, depending where you're from.
Z. As an American, it's Z.
The Zoomers, yeah. They are just labels. They're labels given by sociologists. So it's not education related. It's related to sociology, society as a global community. And therefore, it's connected to world events and the effect that they have on distinct generations. So, for example, I guess it's boomers, the generation between my parents and me. They are the boomers. They're the ones who were born after the Second World War. So they didn't live through that fear of, like my father did. My father was a baby in the war, but his earliest memories are of the Second World War and hiding under a table when the bombs were dropping. So, you know, that level of anxiety in your home as a child, even if you don't have clear memories of it, the anxiety around you, your parents, influences your cognitive development. So the generation between my father and me was, you know, the generation after the war. They didn't have that experience. So inevitably their childhood was different. There was a greater sense of optimism depending where they were, but essentially, you know, there was optimism, technology, you know, even Germany and Japan, they had the big boom in, you know, radios and devices. Rock and roll music in the United States was that, you know, boom, literally, hence boomers, was that optimism is what they grew up into. So it's the influence of world events. World events has influence on the adults around the children. And the two generations, Alpha were born, it depends on sociologists, some say between 2010 and now. They anticipate this generation will end roughly next year, in the next 2 years. Some people say 2012. They're the first generation. I need to check my notes for this. Sorry, I'm a little bit tired. Yeah, all their life they've had handheld devices around them in the home. It's the first generation that has happened. Previous generation, which is Z, the older ones, you know, they grew into devices, but they probably weren't in the home when they were little. This will be the first generation where globally there are more people who are aged 65 and over than people who are 4 and under. This is the first generation ever where older people, you know, there are more of them. The pyramid is beginning to invert. This is also the first generation where half of the population or more lives in urban environments. In the past, it was rural with the predominant. Now we're about 50-50. We're actually a little bit over 50-50 now. It's about 55% of the world's population is urban now. What else? Of course, and this generation, the biggest event of Alpha is the pandemic. These are the children who spent part of their preschool or primary, or even before preschool, in lockdown, or if they're in a country when there was no lockdown, there was still that feeling of anxiety, the face masks, which is blocking the ability to read people's faces. There's been a big influence on speech development, reading and writing, because a lot of schools were closed around the world. I was in a primary school earlier this year, and I was with, how old were they? About 9 years old. And of 30 children in the class, 10 of them were dyslexic. That's an extremely high level. But of course, they were doing Zoom classes before. So when they were younger, the teachers were not able to, spot the dyslexia and support it earlier. So that kind of stuff is happening later. So that's generation Alpha. Whereas Z, or Zoomers, are the ones that were born into the world of the Twin Towers, largely speaking, or were very small when the Twin Towers came down. That anxiety, that fear, the entire planet went into fear mode. So Z is also the first generation that had handheld devices, not when they were very small, but later. 1999 was the big year for sort of internet and blogs and all that. So Z is roughly 1996, 5, 6, 7, around there till 2009, 2010. So it's these kind of things that mark a generation. Of course, it has an effect on the psychology, the cognitive development, and therefore education in the classroom. Zoomers, for example, is the generation of secondary students with the shortest attention span. These two generations have similarities in that because they read fewer books, and we were talking about this before, everybody watching, if you think about your childhood, I was saying C.S. Lewis, the Narnia books, I remember them. I remember a certain amount of Enid Blyton. That's more my generation before, but they were around. the generation after me, you know, Harry Potter, millennials, if you're a millennial, Harry Potter was the one. But if you're a Zoomer, what are your books? You know, if Generation Alpha, what are their books? There aren't really books, but there's a lot of video games and TikTok and Instagram and these things, which means they're reading much smaller texts. They have a smaller vocabulary. As language teachers, we're going to have a lot more work to do teaching them vocabulary, because their vocabulary in their own language is smaller than in the target language. It says they read comics. Yes, comics have got a much more reduced text amount. There's a lot more. They're better at visual literacy, as it gets called, but it's the text literacy. They have a lower level. They can read, of course, but it's just they have a lower vocabulary exposure. So, you know, it's more of an effort for us to expand their vocabulary. Not effort, but, you know, it's something that we need to focus on a bit more.
Well, yeah, I mean, just to jump in, I think it's a great idea of how, I mean, it's true that we really do have to recognize that, like you mentioned earlier, like it is a sociological kind of, it is sociological based. So world events do really impact it. And a lot of times that teachers may just think that, oh, it's just a learning skill, or they think it's the development of the child. But I think it's, like you mentioned earlier, all the points that you mentioned about Twin Towers and pandemic, it really does shape and create a different environment and situations. So it's a lot of adaptations and a lot of other, I guess, stressors that need to be also considered as well. And I think this is like, I mean,
we can all think of something that happened when we were kids. You know, for me, when I was very small, Neil Armstrong landed on the moon when I was very small, but I do have a vague memory of it. Not so much of him landing on the moon, but of building a rocket made of yogurt pots in my preschool class. You know, but so you were saying before about the shuttle when it exploded.
When I was a child, it was a Challenger, and we made NASA astronaut space shuttles out of toilet roll papers, and that was a big event and something memory for me.
These things have an effect, and they do have an effect, and so the pandemic's going to have a big effect. The slight problem with Generation Alpha, and there's another reason I said we need to think about Z as well as Alpha or Zeta, whatever you call it. Z, I keep forgetting, sorry, is that there's very, very little research at the moment for Generation Alpha, because the oldest kids in Generation Alpha have not yet started the adolescent cognitive slope. They're only 11, 12. So as teachers, what we need to do is find out about Generation Z, Zoomers, Z, and then use our common sense and think, okay, and the ones coming up are going to need more connection. We're going to talk about this in a moment. What did they miss out in their primary education? What can we support them with? Where are the gaps going to be? So things like reading texts, expanding vocabulary. I had a note of something else. They are likely to have more exposure to other languages, just because things like video games like Fortnite, Netflix, all these things, you know, there's a lot more exposure to other languages than, for example, my generation had. So we've got more resources, for example, for listening. So it's a little bit of research, but common sense as well, which is why I thought we'd better bring the two generations into this.
Well, like you mentioned earlier, like you mentioned, there is not a lot of current research, but it's in development.
It's in development, exactly. Yes. And it will be, I mean, particularly now we're coming out of the pandemic, there'll be a lot of research into it. And I imagine these kids will be studied quite, you know, in quite detail as they go through the cognitive area, because they're 11, 12 now, so they're just starting. There's three main development stages cognitively. There's the kind of 13 to 15 or 12 to 15 is the first stage, and there's the middle stage, which is 15 to 17, and then 17 and on. Different parts of the brain are kind of fully developing. The teenage years are when our brains are in a massive amount of activity. It's also when we have the biggest brains. When we're about 17 is when our brain is at its biggest. And then after that, it all starts shrinking down because the bits that we don't use
Well, yes, I mean, well, that actually is a perfect segue because even though there is continuous research, there is stuff that we actually do know. So in the next talking points, if we can have our slides pop up really quickly, we can focus on the adolescent brain and how this connects to language learning classroom. You did mention parts of it, the processes, brain size, development of it. But if you can go into a little bit more information about literally how the brain works and what parts of it would be.
So I have a brain here.
Yeah, okay. Let's show us your brain, please.
I have brought a brain with me. Hold on a minute. I'm going to eat a little piece of it. I just dropped a bit of my brain. So this is a brain, okay? Can you see that?
Great
representation. It's roughly similar to a brain. It's a cauliflower. I haven't gone into the shaping of it, but so a brain, a human brain, looks a little bit like the inside of a cauliflower in the middle. I don't know if you can see that. Can you see it? Yes.
Yes, perfect.
All right. So if we imagine that this is a thalamus, now this is a huge generalization, but loosely speaking, the brain develops from the back and lower down to the front and higher up. Okay. So it starts from, the motor skills, cerebellum, which is sort of at the lower back, thalamus, movement, etc. Social brains in the middle, which is around here. And then the prefrontal cortex is one of the last bits to develop. I don't know if you can see that very well. Sorry, my light is making it glow.
Looks good from here, yes.
Right, good. So when you're a teenager, this middle bit is the bit that is going, so it's the middle. And the middle bit is the, sorry, eating cauliflower. I'll have a bite now. The middle bit is the bit that's really, really busy and developing in teenagers. And the middle bit of your brain is the social brain, right? It's the limbic system, but it's the social brain. Now, this is particularly important for us as language teachers because language, apart from grammar, is in the middle of the brain. It's in this part of the brain. Also, memory is in this part of brain. The three main parts of our brain that work together to form memory, long-term and recall, right, that store and recall memories, is in that same part of the brain. Decision-making at a very basic yes, no, right, wrong level is in that part of the brain. All right, so that's all in the middle. Whoops, in the middle there. You'll get the names of the three parts in the moment, but they are, loosely speaking, here. I mean, I'm using a cauliflower, not a real brain, so I can't point too accurately, but caudate nucleus, two amygdalae, and then the hippocampus is over the top. Those three parts of the brain work together. Yep, there's the three names. So the three at the top there, they work together to form memory. And then the prefrontal cortex, which is the bit at the front here, now that develops later, and that doesn't really start developing until in the 17 to 19 and up age group. I've now got cauliflower all over my table, sorry. Why is this important for language learning? Well, because in the limbic system or the social brain, the middle part that is developing in teenagers, that's where lexis happens. That's where expression happens. That's where creativity is. It's where emotions are experienced and labeled or recognized. It's also triggered by emotions and triggered by the senses. And of course, as I said before, it's memory. The front of the brain, which develops later, is where impulse control is. And it's where grammar is. And it's where rational balanced decision taking is. Implications here being basically that if you're doing grammar with your students, you need to give them a maximum amount of support. You can't just expect them to know if it's the present simple, present continuous, because that capacity to really analyze is in the prefrontal cortex, which isn't really developing yet in your teenagers, in your high school students. So we need to really scaffold that type of activity. On the other hand, we can help their cognitive development and help them learn by knowing how to trigger the memory, supporting them with learning empathy, particularly Alpha and Z, which have a lower level of empathy than most previous generations, just because screens mediate so much. Instagram, all the filters on Instagram eliminate a lot of the facial recognition that we do. It's very difficult to tell how people are feeling if you're seeing them on Facebook, Instagram, etc., because there's filters, there's all that. You know, there's less of a face-to-face and body language recognition. The Zoom years, I used to make jokes, you know, when we first came out of lockdown in Britain, I made jokes about never getting to see people from the side for 2 years, you know, so these two generations need support with empathy as well. What else? Creativity, allow them to be creative, allow them to express all that stuff, because that is where they are. We're teaching a language, we can support that. All right. The caudate nucleus also loves problem solving. It's one of the 3 memory areas. So giving them problem solving tasks will really help them learn as well. The amygdala is the main one for senses. So if we trigger the senses, we really support the learning and the memory. The hippocampus largely works by mapping. It doesn't particularly remember content, but it does remember where things are. So it's the part of the brain that when you're in an exam and you're trying to remember the answer of something, you can remember where it is on the page, but not what it says. So in the classroom, if we use maps or positioning or even colored boxes around our vocabulary, you know, these sort of things will help form a mental map, and that will reinforce memory as well. So that's the 4 parts of the brain. As teachers of Generation Alpha, Generation or Zoomers, we need to think about these things. We need to think about triggering the senses and the memory. And as far as I remember, it's the next slide now that we need. I think. Thank you.
Yeah.
Da-da-da, magic. We can do that. We're teachers. We can do magic. Yay. So in the classroom, and I'm really sorry, this is a lot of information for a fairly short period. So June and I have kind of collapsed it down into these 5 points. What they really need is these 5 things, and the top 2 particularly, because the other 3, emergent language, problem solving, and to be front and center, are really the same. They're part of connection and sensorial stimuli. Connection is the main one. Again, I'm going to refer to my notes because there are 5, from memory, 5 distinct ways in which they can connect. It's such a big word, isn't it? Connection sounds a little bit hippie, but anyway, they need to connect to themselves. And that sounds a little strange, but they need to connect to their own motivation. Why are they in the class? Why are they there? Why do they come to class every day? What's their ultimate objective? Not just pass an exam or because my parents, but actually focus on how it's going to help them. Why, you know, what does English mean to them? Make it theirs. To connect to their reasons for learning, connect to the people around them, also connect to how they're feeling. Acknowledge that they're going to have bad days and good days. Help them realize, yes, they can do it. So that's connecting to themselves, their objectives, their abilities. Connect to the other people in the room, including you, the teacher, not just to see you as a machine, to see that you are a human being and you're all a team working together, can learn from each other, and that they have something to contribute as well. They need to connect to the world around them, the world that we live in, and how they can create positive change, because that's very motivating. This current generation, the Zoomers particularly, and we assume the Alphas are going to be similar, they're very interested in how they can change the world for the better, because the world has not been a particularly good place recently. So, you know, so get them to connect to their world, their environment, connect to the content, to what they're learning, to English and to the materials that you're working with. Actually, not just do it, not just turn to the next page, turn the page, but connect to it, make it theirs, personalize it, and connect to their learning. Learn in a way that it sticks. So they need all this connection rather than this isolated little screens disconnect with the phone in front of the face. What was the second thing? Sensorial stimuli. Come on, June, ask me questions or I'll forget.
It is not, I'm also very, very engaged in this as well, because I mean, it takes a lot of the physical part, but the development process and then what it can be done to the classroom. And we've all said this many times as teachers, always connect, try to, as seminars and workshops, trying to build that connection between each other, others, teacher, and content. And it now has a lot of scientific background and evidence behind it.
It does. I mean, it's good for the teacher as well. We all know, probably nobody here, because you wouldn't be here if you're the kind of teacher I'm going to mention, but we all know teachers that just rock up to work every day, do the same thing they've been doing forever and go home again. They don't really connect to their students or to the content anymore. They just go through the motions. So who's learning in that context? Who's learning? Indifference, nobody learns from indifference. Emotions are in the same part of your brain as lexis, as expression, and as memory. If you don't trigger emotions, you're not learning. We all remember the scary stuff, the happy stuff, the really cool stuff, the embarrassing thing that we did. We remember that. We don't remember the stuff that, So we need to create emotions in the class. Not scary, preferably, but not horrible. But, get an emotional connection. Sensorial. There are 6 senses in the brain. Cognitively, there's 6, not just 5. There's the 5 obvious ones. And then there's a thing called proprioception, which is the perception of movement. It's like when you close your eyes, you can still touch your fingers together, or you can touch your nose. You can move around your house at night and not crash into things.
Yes.
You have that's proprioception. So we can trigger those in the classroom. We can use pictures. We can use music. Games, the old throw an invisible ball. I can throw a ball to you guys now. I can throw it like this and you can all catch. Ready to catch? See? So, movement, all those games we play, you get some movement going. And all these things will trigger the learning. Gosh, time is passing really fast.
Yes, it is. It's good to see how you're connecting all, even like you said, the last 3 parts to it too. That connection is very important, and it is a lot of things to be considering, and getting that involved in the classroom, physically moving it into the classroom is also another consideration that our teachers really need to be facing as well.
Well, I would say, an emergent language, when I do lots of stuff with senses, I get the language from the students. I'll show you some activities in a second. And by having the emergent language, that's their language. So that connects to number 5 as well, front and center. It's their language. It's not just the stuff in the course. We add on top of the stuff in the course book. And that helps ownership of the learning. And then problem solving, we can connect, it all works together. Problem solving, give them a task, give them a project, get them to work together and solve a problem. How can you move this marble across the classroom only using 3 pieces of paper? Build something. That's what we do with our students. And they have to work together to build some kind of machine, or get the marble to move the furthest by working together. So this is what they need. They need this connection. They need this feeling of being the most important and that they own the learning. We're going to give you some ideas. We're running out of time, but
yes, I think going into the ideas will be a bit more concrete for, as you explained to me earlier. This would be great to see.
Yeah, let's have a whiz through some ideas. So let's see if there's time for questions. There should be. Never mind. So this is a photo of one of my students. I will say all of the photos here I've got are either adult friends of mine or students, so that because I don't share photos that are of kids, okay? But this is an activity that I do with students. I use imagination. I get them to look at the picture, imagine what she can hear, what she can smell, how she feels, what she can see. Who's the photographer? what's out of the frame. A lot of imagining, go through the senses. But the important thing here is that I have put the image in black and white, because also the imagination is distracted by color. So if we use colored images, bright colored images, that's much better for the memory, because it will fix information, because it's triggering the hippocampus that I was mentioning before. It's forming a map, and the eye moves around more if there's color. So if you want to do a sensory triggering thing, actually use black and white and get the students to imagine the colors, imagine the smell, imagine the sounds, imagine the feeling. Is she hot? Is she cold? What's she doing? What's she thinking about? Etc. So any of these sort of storytelling activities, go for black and white images. Another thing I do with images, so next slide, yeah, whoop, that one, thank you. And then stop, don't move it, is I get my students to give me a selfie where they're making a face, and then I cover it just, using Paint or any of these software things, 3D or whatever. And then we elicit the emotion. How do you think she's feeling? And they look at the picture, and then we have a quick, a brainstorm. Would you like to type in the chat box very quickly? How do you think, this is my friend Georgia, how do you think Georgia is feeling? Read the body without seeing the face. This is an empathy thing as well. It also brings out vocabulary. My students at this point would be allowed to use either electronic dictionaries or real dictionaries that can give any vocabulary. I sometimes do this with animals with lower levels. I have a picture of, it's actually of a fox, but I cover it with a piece of paper and do what I call slow reveal, and they shout animals at me. If you do something where you hide part of the information, you will get a lot more language than if you just show a picture and say, how does she feel? We've got bored. Only bored, is that it? Nobody else is suggesting. Okay. So students would say, yeah, bored or sad, depressed. George is on her mind. Yeah, George is on her mind. She looks sad, bored. Yeah. So bored or sad.
We are getting some questions into this, some responses back to, look like they're bored.
I can see bored and sad, sleepy. I like that one. Yeah. So we elicit from the class, we get as much vocabulary, we put it on the board. Angry, could be. Yeah. And then we reveal the face and we compare. We decide if it's surprise. There we go. There's Georgia. Now, it's a quite hard face to read, but does it really matter? In love, could be. I like it. Yes. Was she in love with me? Maybe. Who knows? Actually, she was annoyed with me for taking her photo. Indifferent. So we got vocabulary. If you just show the picture, you only get one word maybe, but if you cover part of it. Another thing you can do is crop a photo. If you could show us the next slide, please. Thank you. Take a picture, get them to look at the faces. How do the two people feel? What are they talking about? And in pairs, this is a problem-solving thing. The students will write the dialogue. They will then possibly perform the dialogue. Once they've done that, though, I want them to redraft, because we quite often ask our students to correct the spelling and write it again, or correct it. But that's a very boring thing to do. So I often then reveal more information in the photo and get them to rewrite. Could we see the next? Thank you. So here, for example, the first slide, you only saw the two people. My students will tend to think that this is an argument, etc. Then when they see, oh no, there's another person in the room, that will change the conversation. So the language between the two people on the left is likely to be different. So my students are then rewriting their dialogues to act it and maybe adding in the other character. So my own photos or students' photos, and crop them, take out information, and then use the, add it in for them to write. I've got one more activity for you. Now I'll have a quick look at questions. When I do a listening, this is from a song, but it could be any listening text. Rather than just go straight in, listen and do the questions, I still use, and I know it's a little old-fashioned, word clouds. And this one I generated using wordclouds.com. Copy the text, put it in. The software or the app eliminates all the grammar, but it leaves all the lexis. And the bigger words are the ones that are repeated more in the text. I show the students this, and I ask them to make phrases that they think will be in the song, that they can add in grammar, sorry. And the advantage with this is that each student can work to their own level. So their phrase can have 2 words or more. And we were trying this earlier with June. It could be never die, never cry. It could be just see. It could be death in paradise. There you go. It could be. So they add in, before we decide, okay, what is the grammar? What kind of thing? It can be articles, it can be prepositions, it can be auxiliaries, etc. Some of the adverbs. And they make phrases. And then the ones who find it more difficult will just put 2 words together, maybe 3. The ones with more English will put bigger phrases together, or I can put them in pairs with different levels together. And then they have created their own listening exercise. They have put these phrases together, and then we listen to the song or the text to see if any of their phrases are there. If their phrases are there, it doesn't really matter. They will still be able to pull out and understand some of the vocabulary. If you go in, you know what it's like. If you go in blind, probably the wrong word for referring to ears, but it's, it's like when you turn on the radio, there's a moment where you're going, what are they talking about? That feeling. Whereas if you've got some idea before, it helps access. This, by the way, these are the lyrics to a song. Which song is it and who sung it? And if you get the answer correct, you will get a star. And you maybe even get a cauliflower if you live near me.
These have all been great ideas, and I am a little bit mindful of the time, but it's good that you're able to explain a lot of different types of activities. It's not just visual, it's not just movement, but you're interacting with colors, with words, and this definitely does match with any type of learner in the classroom, any age from those 2 generations as well to it too. But once again, I think it's important that we were able to spend more of the time explaining how the activities will be able to be brought into the classroom. But I do want to make sure that we are following with the schedule itself. We did go a little bit over time. If you do have any questions, unfortunately, we don't have questions time to actually answer them now, but we do have, no, it's okay. We do have all of Fiona's contact information listed in front of us. Once again, you can always get your questions into our sessions, and hopefully we'll be able to respond to them later on. But if you have any type of information or questions that you would like to contact Fiona directly with, everything you see here is her contact information. I do want to quickly wrap up to make sure that our teachers have a small break still before our next session. But I do want to thank everyone here today and Fiona. Before we actually do close our time together, Fiona, do you have any type of final comment about your experience or your time today with us, or about the topic or anything else?
Well, I would just say, closing comment, I suppose, for the topic is a Generation Alpha. As I say, there's not much research yet, but we are teachers. We're the ones in the classroom. We're the grassroots. So think about your own experiences, but talk to other teachers, share. Don't just, if you just don't think about your own, that's very limited. But this kind of event or face-to-face events, sharing ideas, we will be the ones to get the research out there faster rather than waiting for it to come out, because it's going to be massive. The whole pandemic globally, depending on where we are, is going to have a huge effect. And it's going to be really quite a tricky generation, I think, unless we support them. And I think that if we're prepared to support them, we'll be the best teachers they've ever had. We already
Excellent.
are.
Couldn't have said it any better than that. So thank you again, Fiona. And William Henderson's comment of going to sleep now and eating that eating that cauliflower is our best next step to do. We want to say thank you to everyone. Once again, thank you, Fiona. Yes, excellent. Josh, Jen, if you're going to come back in again, or Josh, thank you.
Yep, it's me. I'm taking over moderating roles from Jen. So thank you very much, June and Fiona. What a wonderful session. I actually ate broccoli for dinner, or not broccoli. I ate cauliflower for dinner last night, so that really resonated. It was a nice coincidence.
Very Hannibal Lecter.
So thank you again so much. So we'll say goodbye to you now, and we will let our teachers take a short break. But before that, I'll have a few quick announcements. So goodbye again, Fiona and June. Thanks so much for the session. We hope to see you at another event shortly. All right, teachers. So we are going to take a quick 10-minute break. Before that, I would just like to remind everyone that you can claim your certificate for ELTOC. You need to click on the link when it appears in the chat, or copy and paste into your browser, or snatch the QR code wherever it is up there at the top of the screen. Scan that with your phone, and you need to log in, or you need to access that website and then click the button or link to enter your details and claim your certificate. There might be a lot of traffic to the site, so if it doesn't load up first time, that's fine. You've got 48 hours to claim that certificate. So make sure you do that over the next day and a half. And as I said, we're going to take a short break. We have one more session coming up, so do stick with us till the end of the day. But do take this time to grab a coffee, tea, whatever it is, and I'll see you in about 10 minutes time. So thank you all, teachers, and see you shortly. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Hope you had a nice break, got yourself a coffee or tea, and you're ready for the last session of this chapter of ELTOC. So we've got one more great session just about to start. I'll go ahead and introduce the session and our speakers. So this last session is titled 5 Vowel Letters, 20 Vowel Sounds, Lots to Say. And we're very happy to be joined by Robin Walker and Gemma Archer. So let me just give a brief introduction to our two speakers before they come on screen. So Robin has got decades of experience in the ELT industry as a teacher, a trainer, a writer, as well as a consultant. So lots of experience to bring to the table. Gemma as well, very experienced teacher. She's taught in a variety of countries, including UK, Italy, Ireland, as well as the Middle East. Both of our speakers, coincidentally, have worked as an editor of the Speak Out, which is a publication from the Pronunciation Special Interest Group in IATEFL. And they're also working together on a new book for Oxford University Press around pronunciation. So I'll go ahead and bring both of our speakers on screen. So Robin and Gemma, welcome to ELTOC. How are you doing today?
Yeah, good.
Good.
Hi.
All right, we can hear you both clear. So I'll go ahead and turn the session over to you.
Wonderful.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, so I think we're just waiting for our slides to come up. And there we are.
There they are.
Perfect. So our first slide, which you'll see in a second, has this image on it from Robin's wonderful blog called The A to Z of Pronunciation. And if you have not ever gone to Robin's blog, I would heartily recommend you do so. It's a treasure trove of wonderful articles. And I'm not just saying that, it is wonderful. But anyway, the reason that I'm saying this is because it links to our session today and our title, 5 Vowel Letters, 20 Vowel Sounds, Lots to Say. In his blog, Robin addressed the issue of vowels, but it's something that we've been talking about a lot together as well. And as Joshua just mentioned, we've been co-authoring a book recently, which is forthcoming. And in that, and due to that, we've been talking so much about English vowels, and particularly about the difficulty that some of us, myself included, and many of our students have, the challenges that come from English vowel sounds. So this was the kind of reason behind the session, choosing to talk about this. And there was way too much that we could say about vowels. We wanted to say so much more, but we've instead chose to focus on 5 key points, and they represent these 5 vowel letters. So that's the reason, the context behind our session today, and we really hope you enjoy it.
And you know, Gemma, I was just remembering the other day that one of my students, but I'm going a long way back. I'm going back to the middle 80s when I was teaching here in Spain. And it came out, this thing, she'd spotted that there were, with the accent we were using in the classroom then, there were 20 vowel sounds. Mm-hmm. And she said, "You've got 5 letters and 20 sounds. How do you think I'm going to learn English?" It was quite a, she saw this as very challenging, and it is very challenging, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Great. Okay, we can move on to the next slide then. And yeah, so the first point on this slide is neutral. And people might wonder why we've put neutral up there, Robin. So why don't you explain?
Yeah, again, and it's students, but this was not one of my students, but I read about this when I was preparing the position paper for OUP. And this was a student who said, "Look, I actually don't want a UK accent, and I don't want a US accent. I want something neutral." And I thought, now, isn't that such an interesting concept that they should, I mean, first of all, they then went on to say, "I want a Canadian accent. That's neutral." And that really, I had a laugh there. I thought, good God, how many people can distinguish between a North American accent, as in the US, and a Canadian accent? So that was an interesting distinction she made. But then there isn't actually any such thing as a neutral accent. And I don't know if you remember, but Richard Caldwell, our colleague, he wrote a superb article called Lord Rant, and he looked at his own prejudices about accents and made the statement about somewhere in the world there is a social group that hates your accent. There isn't such a thing as an accent which is neutral for everybody. So that's really, I think, quite important, because we carry prejudices about accents, and we have this sort of notion that there is one accent that we should be learning because it's neutral. Well, there's no such thing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's also interesting because, I mean, moving on to the other point, with my own students, because there are a lot of accents here in mainland Spain, and then there's the accents in the Spanish islands, and then you go to South America and there's Spanish spoken, there's loads of accents. And I realized that just telling them that, you know, there's no such thing as a neutral accent wasn't hitting it. And I started to actually work with them and get them to answer questions about accents in Spanish, which clearly, you know, often the discussion flowed through into mother tongue, and I didn't care because they were talking about accents and how we have these prejudices that we carry quite deeply inside us, and yet how they're not an obstacle. And as you travel around Spain, people have quite different accents, but we're immediately in conversation and in communication with each other. But the minute I switched into using their experience of accents in their L1, it was so much easier to come back out and to get them to actually understand that accents exist in English as well, that we shouldn't be frightened of different accents. And in fact, it's wonderful that we do have different accents in English, and the issue is not there. And that there is one accent which is either neutral or which is better. But it was using the L1 that all came about. Absolutely. But you are working in Glasgow at the moment, and that made me wonder, you know, is that problematic for your students when they arrive in Glasgow?
Absolutely. And it really highlights this fundamental issue with regards to accent, which is familiarity and exposure. Certainly most of my students have never heard an accent from Glasgow, let alone Scotland. They don't have that exposure prior to arrival and coming here to study, because most of their classes, most of their training, most of the publications that they've had have provided only a native speaker model, a prestige accent native speaker model, usually something like received pronunciation or general American English. So they've only had exposure to these two accents. They've never had the opportunity to become accustomed, to familiarize themselves with different types of English, different sounds in these different varieties of English. And that's a huge problem, because without this process of familiarization, gradually getting used to a different sound or a different type of accent, it makes it harder to understand. That's a cognitive problem. It takes us longer to understand an accent we're not familiar with. So with regards to students' receptive needs, we as teachers, I think, really have an obligation to help students with this. We need to provide them with guidance and bring in different accents to the classroom, so they have this really important exposure. So it's not such a shock and such a difficult experience when they are hearing different types of English, which they invariably will hear in their time speaking in English.
You know, I'm thinking about Tracy Derwing and Murray Monroe in Canada.
Yeah.
And the social workers were receiving lots of people from Vietnam and saying, we don't understand what they're saying, so we can't help them. And so what Tracy and Murray did was show them what English is like, which is different to the way they would pronounce as Canadian born, but what English is like coming through with a Vietnamese layer or flavor to it. And they pointed out specifically, you know, if the person's Vietnamese and they're speaking English, this might happen or that might happen. And then they let them listen to Vietnamese people speaking English and said, look, there's what we just said. And when these social workers went back in to work with Vietnamese people who just arrived in Canada, they said, "Oh my God, it's just so easy to understand them."
Yeah.
So it was this deliberate. Let's have a look at these other accents. What's happening if someone uses this accent of English? What can we expect their English to be like? And the other thing that I found was interesting. This was from John Field, and he said from his work that the more you exposed people to different accents, the better they got at accents they hadn't even heard yet. And they were just able to adjust far more easily.
Adapt.
But
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I mentioned Derwing and Monroe, and I'm going to mention them again, because for me, they gave us one of the most important pieces of information that has to be in the head of every teacher when they think about pronunciation. And the research that Derwing and Monroe did said that accent and intelligibility are not the same thing. These are two different parts of the whole business of pronunciation and communication, but accent and intelligibility are not the same thing. And that you can have a very strong accent, and okay, they use the word strong, interesting word to use. You can have a very strong accent and still be completely intelligible. And I think we all know, either in English or in our mother tongue, somebody who has a very strong accent and yet is completely intelligible. You never struggle to understand what they're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
While we're here, I just noticed a question from Mickey in the chat. Mickey has asked us to say again the title of the article. I think Mickey's referring to Richard Caldwell's article.
The article was Lord Rant.
And it was published in Speak Out, I believe.
It was indeed published in Speak Out. Yeah,
Speak Out is the biannual publication of the IATEFL pronunciation SIG, and is available to purchase online if you go to the IATEFL Pron SIG website, if you're interested in getting a copy of that.
Or you can contact us and we'll sort something out with that one particular article. Yeah.
Great.
Can we move on and to the next letter? There's the A is for accent. So we're sticking with the vowel letters. The next one would be, next slide.
E.
Is out there? Yeah, the E. And the E was for English as a lingua franca. And I
mean, that's a term that lots of people have heard, but LFC is maybe not something they're as familiar with, Robin. So why don't you explain to people what that means?
Yeah, well, the LFC is the lingua franca core, and I think this is one of the most powerful pieces of practical classroom resource stuff that's come out of all the sometimes quite academic research into English as a lingua franca. But Jennifer Jenkins' initial work back at the end of the previous century and the beginning of this century, she was able to highlight through actually examining empirical evidence the things that matter most if you want to be intelligible. Let's use the word intelligible and not accent, now that we've differentiated. If you want to be intelligible internationally, your pronunciation has to have the lingua franca core features, which is basically you've got to be good at all the consonants. You've got to be good at the length of your vowels, the duration. You've got to be good at dealing with consonant clusters, especially the beginnings of words. And you've got to be good at sentence stress, which is more technically nuclear stress. So she gave us a core. She said, focus all of your pronunciation teaching attention here. And the thing that absolutely fascinated me from the very first moment was what wasn't in the core, what was not there. And it was all the stuff that all of the exercises in course books were hammering home. It was all the stuff about you have to use weak forms, and you have to you have to have the right rhythm, and you have to use all the right tones, and all of this is totally outside the lingua franca core. In other words, these things like weak forms and schwa are not actually necessary to be internationally intelligible. And for me as a pronunciation teacher with so limited time in the classroom, that was such a gift. Focus on 4 things. Yeah.
And I think as well, it's not just that it's not necessary for intelligibility, but sometimes these features can actually reduce intelligibility in an international setting.
Yeah.
Which is really important to consider as well.
Yeah, and especially all the stuff about weak forms and coalescences and things like that. These features can make you harder to understand. And now when I listen in the morning to the BBC, I listen to Radio 4 2 or 3 times a week. There are native speakers on the BBC radio program that are really a struggle to understand. And I notice they have massive vowel reductions and whole syllables that they don't pronounce, and I go, yeah, that's right. They're not fulfilling the criteria of the lingua franca core.
Yeah, and lots of people think that if we teach students the lingua franca core, they're speaking a kind of lesser English, that it's like a fall in standards, because everyone will just speak exactly how they want to. Everyone will speak differently, and that will cause problems.
Well, everyone will speak differently, of course, but this is not a falling of standards, because everyone will have to be good at the 4 components of the lingua franca core, and they'll have to be very good. And one of those components was actually this thing about vowel length, vowel duration, which was very, very seldom dealt with fully in pronunciation teaching previously. And I don't think it's about falling standards. I think it's about different standards. And so in the 2 pictures we've put up there, you have people dancing. And the classic dancing there's on the left, and there's some break dancing on the right. And you could say that break dancing is a total fall of standard. You know, there is the standard on the left, classic ballroom dancing. No, that's confusing the issue. These are 2 totally different sets of standards. And the guy on the right is just as brilliant at dancing as the couple on the left. So I don't think taking a lingua franca approach via the lingua franca core, this is not a falling standard in pronunciation teaching. It's a shift in standards. But you had
I was just going to say,
you said something about shabby clothes, which I think ties in a bit.
Yeah, definitely. You and I were talking about that story that we heard where someone said, you know, having a bad accent in English, it's like going to an interview and wearing shabby clothes. It gives them the wrong impression. And you and I were just discussing, you know, what does it mean to have a bad accent? This is such a subjective thing to say. Bad to who? And really, the only type of bad accent we can have is to be unintelligible. To be unintelligible is the only bad accent we can have. That's a really serious problem, regardless of whether you're working towards a native speaker accent or an international English accent. Lack of intelligibility is a huge problem. And as you said, Robin, you know, if you work on the features of the lingua franca core, if you master those features, you are an intelligible speaker. There is no place for the word bad. And yeah, I think we have to consider the juxtaposition as well about shabby clothes and who's making a bad impression. Like we said a minute ago, if we turn the tables and put a native speaker in an international scenario or forum, and are they the one in shabby clothes because they are using these vowel reductions and connected speech, and they're not making the effort to make themselves intelligible and living up to the standards of international English. So I think it's a really great image, the idea of shabby clothes, and we really have to consider, well, you know, who are we talking about here, and in what scenarios are we considering? And I think it's also important to think about, you know, the imposition. Lots of people say lingua franca core. It's an imposition to their students who are aiming for a native speaker model in English, and that it's you know, interrupting or preventing them from reaching that, which I think is really interesting, because for so many years in the English language teaching field, you know, students have had an accent imposed upon them. The native speaker model, the prestige models, which have been, you know, dominant throughout all of the ELT field, throughout all of our publications. And really, the wonderful thing about the lingua franca core is it gives us choice. We don't have to follow what we've been presented with for so long. It gives us this option, which I think is really important.
I mean, the imposition, this thing about driving people towards an accent. This is how you should sound. This is ultimately, and I know that once we got into communicative approaches in the 80s, people were saying, oh, well, it doesn't matter if they actually don't sound totally like native speakers, but this is what they should be aiming to sound like. You know, we know they're not going to make it. This is very condescending also. It's not just an imposition, it's condescending. So we know they're not going to be able to do this accent, but they're going to have to try to do this accent, and we'll be tolerant of the fact that they don't do this accent. And that is not just an imposition, it's actually condescending. And I think it's just so much better now that people can say, okay, what is my goal? My goal is to go out there and be intelligible. And what's interesting now is that they've said to me that if I wish, I can retain accent from my mother tongue and my mother culture, and therefore through my English go out and be an ambassador of my country and my culture through my accent. And Spanish people that I've worked with, because I work mainly in tourism, they were really happy with this idea. And they said, of course we want to sound Spanish. We are Spanish. And what we sell is Spain. So we don't want to sound English because we're not selling England. So this is I thought that it's not an imposition. It's just opening the door. There's so much freedom to actually use pronunciation to be you. And that freedom wasn't there before because of this imposition of one of the two big prestige accents, the RP accent or the general American accent.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Next letter.
Next slide, yes. So yeah, this is I for intelligibility.
Oh, yeah. You chose this picture.
I did, yeah.
Yes, you did. And I think you better explain this picture. I think it's fascinating, but I want to know your thinking behind it.
Sure. So this is a picture from a British hospital, and it's like an operating theatre. So these are all medical professionals that would be there for a patient while they're having an operation. And what struck me about this picture in particular is that they're all holding up signs saying, I think it's they're either the country that they're from or their mother tongue, and they all have a variety of different mother tongues, and they're from a variety of different places. And what struck me about this picture in thinking about it, and the reason that I thought it was important to use today, was for these people to save lives, to work together as a team and help their patients through these really important surgeries. They do not need to have a native speaker accent. The most important thing for them to be able to work together is for them to be intelligible to one another. And so that was the reason behind the picture, that this idea that you need to have a native speaker accent is false, because even in these high stakes, life-saving scenarios like surgery, it's not necessary. It's not necessary for them at all.
It's such a great example of where what is working is they're intelligible to each other. And I guess they're having to make some sorts of adjustments in their head, even in their own pronunciation, perhaps, to improve intelligibility. The other day with my neighbors in Spanish, I just said Birmingham, the name of the city. And I could see they hadn't registered. And that's so I switched it and I said Birmingham with a slightly... And I thought, I've actually just accommodated to them. But I guess there's quite a lot of accommodation going on in surgery when they're talking to each other.
Definitely, yeah. So I'll quickly jump to that fourth part just briefly, which you mentioned, accommodation. So that's such a perfect example, Robin, of accommodation when we slightly alter our speech for our listener to make it easier, more comprehensible for our listener to pick up and understand. And this is something that all of us can do to make ourselves easier to understand to an international audience. So we presume that all of these medical professionals in this picture, all of whom having a different mother tongue, will have to accommodate their speech so that they can all understand each other easily. And that might mean changing the way they speak, adjusting their pronunciation slightly to make themselves easier to understand. And that's the reality of working with different accents. We all have to accommodate all the time for discussion, for communication to take place. And and this is something that we can help students with. You can help students to accommodate, to learn how to accommodate, and we can also provide them with exposure so they start getting used to other people who are accommodating for them. So it's something that we can get better with training.
That ties back in with what we were saying before about the work that Tracy Derwing and Murray Monroe did with the social care workers. They actually trained them to accommodate their listening to the Vietnamese accented English that they were going to be meeting every day at work. So we know actually that this can be taught, and in fact all of the things that are necessary so that when you pronounce English that you are intelligible, these can also easily be taught in the classroom. It's quite interesting. We talked before about the lingua franca core, but the things that that are outside the lingua franca core, for example, the use of the tones, the rise, the fall rise, they are really difficult to get across in the classroom successfully. They're not very teachable, in other words. And what's interesting about the other things that make you intelligible, the 4 areas of the lingua franca core, is that they are very teachable. And so intelligibility is something that we can go into the classroom and work with through the lingua franca core, and we can make good progress with students' intelligibility in relatively little time. It's very much something that is teachable if you make intelligibility the focus of your pronunciation teaching. Yeah. I think that's what makes it. Gemma, I think we need to move on.
Yes, our next slide.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other tongue. Yes, go for other tongue.
Yeah, that's you, isn't it? Obstacle and elephant. You were mentioning that.
Yeah. So the obstacle and elephant, that refers to the English idiom elephant in the room. And if that's not an idiom you're familiar with, basically it means that there's a big issue that everyone is aware of, but they're not talking about. And this links into how for many, many years, our students' L1, their mother tongue, was seen as an obstacle. It's something which got in the way of their English pronunciation. The desire to drop old speech habits and develop new ones. But of course, the mother tongue is something that doesn't just disappear. And so for many people, the L1, the mother tongue, was the elephant in the room. They were trying to ignore it really hard. But actually, what nowadays we can consider is that the mother tongue can be helpful rather than problematic for us. Would you agree with that, Robin?
For me, it was a radical change in my classroom practice when I started to accept that this other pronunciation, in my case of Spanish, it's in the room with me. So I need to accept this.
But it doesn't have to be a negative, does it?
No, not at all.
And if we consider that actually it can be beneficial, because many of the features in our students' mother tongues are also in English, so that there's a kind of link there between the mother tongue and English as a second or third or whatever language, because we can actually lighten the load. If students, most languages will have a minimum of 5 vowels, probably more. They will have many consonants. Most languages will have some form of lexical stress. So they already have all of these features in their mother tongue, which will parallel into English in many ways. So we have to consider that actually, if they already have these features in their mother tongue, we can actually make better use of our classroom time, which is always tight, limited time. We can make better use of our time focusing on the features instead that they don't have, that will increase their intelligibility. So we can definitely change our perspective and consider it a positive thing that they have these features, and instead choose to spend our time in ways that will really improve their intelligibility.
I mean, in my own experience, a sort of fairly key moment was when I was obliged, for various admin reasons, to start my degree here in Spain. And I was finding out about Spanish as part of the degree, and they were explaining the pronunciation of Spanish. And I suddenly go, oh my God, I've got this wrong about my students who are trying to pronounce English vowels, especially this length issue, which is so important for intelligibility. We all assume that they actually make the vowels too short. And this is actually in loads of books of advice. You know, if your students are coming from Spanish as their mother tongue background, they will make English long vowels too short. That's true, but it's not the whole thing. And in fact, what happens is that they make the short vowels too long and the long vowels too short. And by knowing more about how Spanish works as a language, I was able to spot and get a much clearer focus on what was the problem with vowels. What is the problem with vowel length for Spanish speakers of English? But it was only once I'd understood how Spanish worked with vowels that I was able to understand how it helped or hindered my students' attempts at English vowel length. And the same with things like, you get these lists, you know, if your students are Spanish, they'll have problems with B. And I go, okay, actually, they might have problems with V, but B is a sound in Spanish, and they do use it. And there are places where they use it regularly at the beginnings of words, as in bala, then they pronounce basically the same B. However, the more I learned about Spanish, the more I understood that when it's in the middle of a word, as in the word habit, for example, then the B switches into something remarkably like an English verb. And when it's at the ends of words, well, all sorts of things happen to it. But it was knowledge of the first language, and it was bringing that first language pronunciation in that really allowed me to understand what was happening, what my problem was. That gave me a clearer focus on my problem. Mm-hmm. So for the first language, yeah, the other tongue here, this mother tongue is just, and it's such a great resource, because again, I've read lists of problems for Spanish speakers of English, and they say, yeah, they can't do shh, but it's absolutely all over Spain. It's part of my local regional accent. It's part of the accent in the area called Galicia. It's part of Catalan. It's part of Basque. And so it isn't a part of formal Castilian Spanish, and yet all my students can then access the sound through other parts, hidden bits of their mother tongue. And I think that's really interesting as well. This is why in the article that was published in English Teaching Professional, I love the title, Accentuate the Positive, that the other tongue, the mother tongue, in the classroom is a resource. It's not an obstacle. Yeah. And it's just such a powerful resource. It cannot be ignored. It should not be ignored.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that change in perspective is so important and so vital, really, going forward in the pronunciation classroom.
Another letter?
Another slide. Okay, so we have spelling at the top of this one, Robin. Why is spelling our first point here?
It comes back to the thing that student said to me way back in the 80s, you know, what, 5 written letters and 20 sounds? Yeah. And I kept looking at spelling, and my students complained bitterly. They said there's no logic between what you write and what you say. And it's interesting because I can see that, you know, you take the letter U, which is what's in the slide there, the number of pronunciations of the letter U in English is quite, it's really discouraging, in fact, I imagine, for students. I counted that the letter U by itself can produce 3 different sounds. And then when the letter U is with other other letters combining other letters, there's another 9 different sounds. So the letter U can generate 12 different sounds in English. And they're vowel sounds, obviously. Well, and that is it affects vowels. I think that's why I left myself that bullet point. The sound spelling irregularities affect the vowels more than the consonants. I find a lot more regularity, and very easy to teach regularity. So when you get the combination TH, it's very simple to teach what is the sound spelling relationship. But with the vowels, I thought, so there's no way out. We have to do IPA. My students have to learn IPA. And I spent at least 10 years of my career using IPA all of the time in the classroom, even bullying my students to get familiar with IPA. And then I bumped into phonics, working with primary school teachers. And I thought, wow, this is way better than IPA, because this is dealing with the problem of the irregularity of English spelling. But it means that you can go straight away without any intervention of dictionaries and things like that. At IPA, you can go straight into a really reasonable attempt at a word because you've learned the sound spelling relationships. And phonics for me, from which I learned from primary school teachers, I started transferring into English. But 20, this woman's 20. Sorry to come back to you, Gemma, and you're Scottish. You don't have 20 vowels, do you?
That's right. We have in standard Scottish English, in Scottish Standard English, we have 12 vowel sounds, and yeah, hopefully you can all understand me out there, out there in the ELTOC internet world. Hopefully I'm intelligible to you. So far, most of my students seem to find me pretty intelligible, and I don't use 20 vowel sounds. So yeah, I think it's a number that obviously it's unnecessary to have 20 vowel sounds to be intelligible. It's not necessary at all. And Robin, you mentioned that really interesting trip to New Zealand that you had.
Oh yeah.
And you were saying that it obviously New Zealand, they speak English in New Zealand, but just because they speak the same language as you doesn't mean that you can immediately understand everything perfectly. It takes time to tune in and to get used to and become familiar with the different way they use vowels, the different sounds that they have in New Zealand English. But once you've...
Sorry, I was going to say, I think what was interesting, I mean, these are these moments in your teaching career when suddenly you evolve and you see that something from a totally different perspective. Landing in Auckland, the first afternoon with Christine, my wife's friend, I was sitting there going, I don't understand her. She's a native speaker. She's an educated native speaker. She's a university lecturer, and I don't understand her. And I was quite shocked by that. And then the next day when I got up, I realized that I was understanding virtually everything. And by the afternoon of the second day in Auckland, I couldn't work out what the problem had been. And I assumed it was jet lag or something like that. And it was so interesting that, and again, I don't think that the New Zealand English accent has 20 vowels either. And the US accent, well, I find that the Australian accent certainly doesn't have 20 vowels. And the weird thing is they don't have the vowels, and they don't have the same vowels. This is you hear an Australian accent and you go, wow, they're doing things quite different. And yet I understand them. And this is back, you see, this is where we came in, that accent. Well, it's where we came in, and it's the middle, Gemma. Accent and intelligibility are absolutely not the same thing. Yeah. And I think what's even more interesting is that I look back at when I was trying to teach an accent, and I look back at the first 1981 to about 2000. So I'm looking back at the first 20 years of my career. And what I look back at is continued failure. and the sensation that I'm wasting my time on pronunciation teaching in the classroom because my students aren't getting even close to this accent. And then English as a lingua franca landed on my doorstep, and fortunately, I think I had an open enough mind to take it on, and I started working towards intelligibility. And students' success rates in terms of them becoming intelligible, they were there, and the students perceived it because they were going out at weekends and doing jobs as waiters and things like that, and they were testing out this thing that we were doing in class and finding out that it worked. And so I went from teaching pronunciation towards failure, which for them was grim, and for a teacher after 20 years is really awful. And it was this flip. And it's the flip away from working towards an accent and towards working towards intelligibility. It absolutely lit up pronunciation teaching for me.
And really, I mean, again, coming back to our the picture of the medical professionals, you know, we can get used to an accent and different vowel sounds because consistency is the key. If we're listening to a new speaker, as long it doesn't matter that the vowels are different, but the fact that the vowels are consistent, the speaker is using the same vowel sounds all the time, and we can become used to that. We can get familiar with that, and that helps us to become intelligible to one another.
And
so,
of course, that becoming useful was what happened in New Zealand. And funnily enough, from New Zealand, we went to Singapore, and we went through the same process, but this time I knew it's all right, Robin, relax. They're speaking English with a Singapore English accent, and you've not heard that before. But tomorrow when you get up, and it was exactly like that, Gemma. It's so amazing. And my students have all, you know, been able to come back and say, yeah, it was terrible in Birmingham the first day, but it was all right. By the weekend, it was okay. And your students surely must go through the same process. They arrive in Glasgow, they've never heard a Glasgow accent, and they go, oh my God, I don't understand. And then suddenly, yes, they're understanding.
Yeah, and the ones that understand most are the ones that are interacting with local people and getting and gaining that exposure and becoming familiar with those vowel sounds, those different vowel sounds. They are the ones that become accustomed to it most quickly because they're hearing it and becoming, you know, familiar with it.
I think we need to wind up, however.
Yes.
Clark's talking about accent fun. I'm just reading one of the comments there. Clark talking about accent fun. There's always there's always an accent that you're not comfortable with at first, and so this is just part of the actual the joy of it. But what's amazing is how quickly we do become familiar. And we shouldn't be frightened of our accents. And I don't think that we need to get people speaking with the same accent. It will be a dreadful world. And by getting people to work with their own accent towards intelligibility, we get further faster. But I think we also help encourage people to deal with difference. And on a bigger picture, actually, is sort of summing up, helping people to be flexible and deal with difference is absolutely critical. Let's go really big. World peace is threatened when you're not flexible and tolerant of difference. And so accent is not the way to go in terms of driving people to one accent. Accents are the way to go, and intelligibility is the thing that will allow accents to work together.
It's a life lesson.
It's a life lesson. It is, Gemma. It's a life lesson. What is that? A bit of philosophy at 5 o'clock in the morning Spanish time is not bad.
Yeah, for sure.
People are basically people are thanking us, which is very nice. But the only thing we did was talk about what really lights us up at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Great.
William's sorry, there's one person here, William, who's totally grasped the basic message. Let's stop worrying about teaching accent. Let's take very seriously the business of teaching intelligibility, and that can be done. And what we've been involved, we've done it. Yeah. Intelligibility.
Aleda has said our accent is part of our identity, our cultural capital. I love that.
It is, yeah, absolutely. And we should want to keep. I love that. Thank you, Aleda. Love that.
Thank you, William. Glad that you, yes, Robin and Gemma's life lessons. There you go. We've imparted something of use. Great. Any other questions?
Yeah, Madeline, it is. Yeah, this is new. So the important thing is to go slowly. I don't think Gemma or myself are suggesting people need to change overnight from the way they teach pronunciation to the way we teach pronunciation. But you do need to start going down that road away from teaching a specific accent and towards teaching intelligibility in your classroom.
And you'll see the differences.
Lisa, yeah, absolutely. The whole world speaks English, but let's have the whole world speaking English in its own way.
Wonderful sentiment. Thank you so much, Robin and Gemma. What a wonderful session. I learned so much I didn't know about my own accent and pronunciation in general. So, and the comments, yeah, keep coming through, overwhelmingly positive. So, thank you so much for that amazing session. We do have a link to share in the chat, I believe, for one of the resources. There it is. There's a link there in the chat. So if you want to know more about English global communication, you can click those links in the chat. And yeah, it's time to say goodbye to Robin and Gemma. So thank you so much again. And
thank you for having us.
do hope to have you at an ELTOC at some point in the future. So thanks again.
Got that.
Brilliant. Thanks so
Hi
much.
there, everybody. Thanks for being there.
All right. So big thanks to all of our speakers. And it is unfortunately time to close out another fantastic chapter of ELTOC. I would like to thank again all of our speakers. First, Professor Corton, Fiona, and then Robin and Gemma just now, as well as from Oxford, June Lee and myself. Great sessions, a lot of different topics from artificial intelligence to pronunciation to how the brain works and as far as learning languages. So lots of great topics. Go ahead and let us know how you felt about ELTOC. If you liked it, if you loved it, click those buttons on your social channels and let us know how you found today's sessions. So thanks again to all of our presenters for joining us, imparting all that knowledge, sharing their expertise. And big thanks to the moderator team as well. Thanks to all the hardworking staff at Oxford to put this event together, answering your questions in the chat and making the event go off as smooth as possible. And then finally, I would like to thank all of you teachers for joining today's session. Lots of excellent questions came through the chat, lots of engagement with the speakers. It's really, yeah, the audience, the teachers like yourself that make these events as powerful and as impactful as they are. So thanks again for spending time with us today. All right, so if you haven't yet claimed your certificate, be sure to do that within the next 48 hours. There'll be a link in the chat a few times. And as I said, you've got until Monday, so please do that. It might be a bit slow if everyone's rushing to the site at the same time, so do keep trying back over the next couple hours if you have trouble accessing it right away. But it will be there. It will be able to click or tap on the certificate info and enter your details and get your certificate. And you'll find all the resources from today's sessions in that same website. So do be sure to visit that. All right, so we are going to wrap up the session with a little video. But before that, I'd just like to say a few words from Oxford University Press, remind you of some of the ways that you can continue to connect with OUP, with Oxford, as well as with other like-minded teachers such as yourselves. So please, I've got two things for you to do. So the first is to connect with OUP on our social media channels. So make sure you are subscribed and following us on social media. That's the easiest way to find out about all the events and resources that we put out to help you as teachers do your job. And then finally, the other thing I'd like to say is on that link that's in the chat there, you can connect with your local Oxford University Press office. You can connect with the team. You can connect with your consultant. Anything that you need, we're there to support you. So please do follow that link. You can fill in the contact form, and someone from OUP will be in contact with you shortly. So whatever your query is, we're here to help you. So please do take advantage of that. So thanks again. I hope you all had an amazing time. I had a great time. It was a lot of fun to spend time with you. Listen to all the questions, all the comments from the chat. There you go. There's the banner that says, don't forget to click on the description. You get all the resources from today, as well as the link to claim your certificate and contact your local OUP office as well. So thank you all again. I hope to see you at a future ELTOC. We'll be running these in the future. So do, as I said, make sure you're following us on the socials so you know when these are happening. And I wish you all a wonderful rest of your weekend. So we are going to play a short video to with a few other reminders and a few things. So enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope to see you again. Thank you so much for joining us.
At Oxford University Press, we know that your work as an English language teacher evolves constantly. So to support and empower your teaching, we offer a variety of professional development opportunities designed for you and informed by your collective teaching experiences. Our materials are underpinned by research and cover a range of topics and methodologies and are available 24/7. We support you so you can be the best teacher that you can be. Connect, learn, grow.
Whatever your students want to read and whatever their level of English, the Oxford Reading Club Digital Library will have the perfect range of e-books for them. Oxford Reading Club. The best stories make the best readers.
Language is more than words on a page. It's how we express ourselves, how we share ideas. Learning English opens the door to new opportunities, new perspectives, new people.
I'm sorry, that's for you.
Don't worry. Every tiny step forward is part of something bigger, something better. The moments when you get it right. Moments when it takes all you've got. Moments when you connect. When you dream. When you grow.
Hi.
Hi. When you find the words.
I'm nervous, but it's like, you know.
you.